Good evening. Welcome to this month's very busy Startup Grind. This month, we are partnering with European Startup Universe and offering you a series of workshops about setting up, creating, enabling, enhancing your venture. Just a few words about Startup Grind. Startup Grind is the world's largest startup community. And what we aim is to change the world one company at a time. We believe that we would like that in making friends and not contacts, and we believe in giving first, not taking, and we believe in helping others before helping ourselves. And we see it as our mission to give companies everywhere the education and opportunities they need to build, grow, and scale their companies. Now, just a few housekeeping notes about this event. Those of you who have registered, you can ask your questions in the chat or via the Q&A feature, and we will take them accordingly as they are coming. And this workshop is really a hands-on workshop because we would like to share the experience of Nicolas with you, but also that you are able to ask your questions. But now, without further ado, I would like to thank Nicolas for joining me. Good morning.
Good morning, Steve.
And Nicolas, just in a few words, who is the recruiter? What is the recruiter doing? Just in a few words, just to settle what you are offering.
Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. So Recruiter was created 9 years ago, and we provide recruitment and executive search services for companies located in Luxembourg. So meaning that we help them to identify, to source, to select candidates everywhere in Europe and even more for very specific position where there is a lack of local resources. We also work on local recruitment processes, and our clients are active in the digital sector, in IT industry, services, a little bit in finance, but not too much. So I will say 60-70% of our business on a daily basis consists in supporting companies in managing their recruitment processes. And we do also offer additional HR services, such like background check services, assessment, evaluation. So another scale of, I would say, HR services. But yeah, main business is among the supporting companies in their recruitment projects.
Okay, thank you, Nicolas. I think that's already proof that you can answer the questions which are coming. In order to start the discussion going on, the idea of Startup Europe Universe is to get the companies on the same level, more or less, and in order to enhance them. And now, if we look at recruiting or HR in general, when one starts a company, one starts is either on one's own or with some partners. And if one doesn't have a partner, or imagine you start a venture and you don't have a partner, or you have a partner, what would you recommend in order to get started, in order to make sure that afterwards there are no problems? I mean, from the administrative point of view, are there any suggestions?
I will say, so if I understand well your question, when a founder would like to hire another partner to further develop and start the business, I will say the profile, to me, it's really important to have someone who can bring additional skills. So meaning not hiring, not doing a copy paste. Usually people tend to recruit the people who think and behave the same way than them, and I will say that it's probably a mistake. So to me, diversity is really important, and I will say when a company is run and developed by 2 or 3 people, from the beginning, it's really important to have people who are able to bring different skills, meaning people who are able to think on a long-term basis, who have the vision, who can set up plans for the future. But on the other side, as a startup, it's important to deliver, to be operational and ready from day one. So it's important on the other side to have people who can deliver on a short-term basis. So to me, it's most important, yes, to have this kind of complementary skills and profile. I'm not saying that it won't work if the profile are really similar, but that will be more difficult for one partner to challenge the other one, because probably they will think the same way. So they will comfort themselves in the way of thinking and making decisions, which may be not the best idea.
Okay, thank you very much. And then, okay, we have now the founders, the founding team, let's call it like that. And now we are going to develop our venture. And when developing, okay, let's say we are more, as you also say, you are more focused on the ICT, on the tech side, sector, sorry. If we are now going to look to hire or to acquire technical skills like engineers and so on, what would you recommend, or what the steps to take, or eventually those not to take, because that's also interesting.
Of course, in hiring, I would say tech skills and engineers, I will say, of course, there is a framework which has to be defined, and to me, there is no concession possible, I will say, on the tech side. However, I think it's really important to have people who can fit the company culture and the values of the founder, because when the company is very small, there are much more relationships between 4 or 5 people than between 1 or 200 people, and people really work together in the same office or remotely, doesn't matter, but they communicate a lot and they work a lot. So I think, of course, there is a framework which has to be defined, a technical one, but after that, it's really important to have a good fit in terms of value and company culture. Of course, it's difficult when you hire someone because you don't really know, but there are some tools to assess this, and it's really important to listen to your own feeling. I would say it's probably one of the best assessment tools. So I will say, yeah, in order to develop well the business, really to think, yeah, am I able to have a lunch, to have a beer, to have a drink, or whatever it is with that person after work? Yes or no? If it's a no, then you should think twice, especially in the beginning when you start to hire your first employee, I will say. If I remember my own story, I remember very well the person I hired. She was not coming from Luxembourg. She did not speak French. As you know, in Luxembourg, it can be an advantage. She had no clue about the market, but she had a good fit. And it was a good decision. So it was out of the comfort zone, but at the end, it was a good fit because it was the cultural fit. So to me, this is what really matters. As soon as we agree on the technical framework, then it's all about the cultural fit.
Okay, thank you. I mean, that is now about the fit with the person. But let's say we are, put yourself in this point that we have created a venture. We are on technical venture. Maybe we as the founding team or the team members, we have an idea, but we don't know how to get on the technical specs. I mean, we don't have the technical expertise. Are there some advices or hints you would say, okay, be careful if yourself are not technical experts or engineers and so on, and except apart from the cultural fit, is there something where one could or should pay attention?
Technologies are changing, I would say, very fast. So most important, it's probably to hire people who can learn fast, who are agile, who are able to change the way of working, meaning that you can do mistakes in a company. It's probably the best way to learn. So I would say if a technical framework is not defined, probably it's really important to have like an architect or someone who is able to develop a roadmap, a technical roadmap. Of course, it's really important. You can have it from the top, or you can have it from the staff. However, it's important to know where you want to go. Of course, we are talking about experimenting things, trying technologies for sure. But at the end of the day, usually when you are in a startup mode, you probably have different competitors, and you don't see them, but you are in the same ways because maybe you have the same ideas and other people have the same idea at 1,000 kilometers from you. So it's really important to be fast. So yeah, to me, if we are talking about IT-driven companies, yeah, there is a need to have a kind of IT guru or technical driver who knows what he's talking about. Open for new solutions and technologies, but it's like a race, especially in the digital sector.
On the other hand, we are now talking about the first hires, as you were saying, I mean, the cultural fit and so on. And if we stay on the engineering or technical profiles, where would you go to look for them? Let's say we are talking now from Luxembourg, as a Luxembourgish company or company operating out of Luxembourg. What would you eventually recommend?
I will say, assuming that we are, in terms of language skills, we are, I would say, only looking for English speakers. We don't have any limitation in Europe. I will say what works well. I will say, I mean, the people who are interested in moving in Luxembourg for the time being, because it can change. We have a lot of success with south of Europe, so all the countries around the Mediterranean, so North Africa, Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, south of Europe. I would say it works well. Few countries like Lebanon or Jordani as well, and East Europe, of course. So I will say there is no one specific country to be targeted. I will say Luxembourg is a lot of experience in hiring people from everywhere in Europe. So a few years ago, we were hiring mainly in East European countries, and it's still the case. There are a lot of very skilled people open to come in Luxembourg. However, we see now that south of Europe is really attractive as well. And Luxembourg is, it works well with south of Europe. With people from East European countries, they are very qualified as well, but sometimes they are not open to relocate. So because of private reasons. So I will say that in the past, we have been having a lot in south of Europe and East European countries.
Okay.
The main challenge is more about the family for the move.
Okay. Sorry, I interrupted have interrupted you. And then still staying at the technical part, or at the technical profiles, would you more go for an experienced one? Or would you say give somebody a chance who is not so experienced but has some knowledge in the technology, but is not as experienced as maybe a senior person? What would you recommend? We are talking really on early stages.
I would say that both works, meaning that a junior profile is probably doesn't have any religion on specific technologies, and he is open to work on many different things. Someone who has more experience, usually what we see in the tech sector, the people, they tend to become more and more specialized. And after 10, 15 years and being very specialized in one technology, it's more difficult for them. They are not interested in learning a new one. So I will say both have advantages. I will say probably hiring an architect or more senior profile, I will go for someone with more experience. But if you are looking for developers where we don't really know which kind of technologies, I think that a junior with a great education and a strong potential probably will be an interesting choice, because the person will be open to different frameworks and technologies.
Okay, that's from the technical side. And if you're now going to, we're still in the first hires in the early phase. And if you go now more, let's say, so to the sales business development part, because it could be that the founders, they are the brains who see the solution and can
Mhm.
devise the product, but eventually they do not are not the ones who can open the doors to
Mhm.
the potential customers or prospects. How would you go about that? What would your recommendation or your advice be for a new young company?
Um, for the sales, I think it's really important to focus to hire someone who can understand the client on the functional side. So talking about functionality of a product and not about the technical framework, because in general the client doesn't really understand how it works and it doesn't really matter. So
Hmm.
I think it's really important to have a sales who can understand what are the business issues on the customer side. I can give you an example. We hired a company to that was specialized in that developed a very powerful translation system dedicated to the financial sector. So they have decided to hire salespeople with a strong banking knowledge
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, the technical part, the sales doesn't. For them, it's not really important, but they needed to have someone who understands the vocabulary and everything related to the banking sector in order to have someone who can face client relationship and have real discussion with a client. So someone to understand the business of the customers, so of the targeted market. It's
Hmm.
really important because in order to have someone who is credible enough in front of a customer,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
really someone who can talk easily and not technically to the customer. Because at the end, we
Hmm.
are talking about a business solution, and this is what matters. There are other people who are qualified to talk about technical things, pre-sales, architect, developers. The sales is there, as you said, to open the door, to discover opportunities, and opportunities, it's about more about business than technical things.
Hmm. Okay. And on the sales, would you say would you more opt, for example, young companies, they're very often approached or they are overwhelmed by the portfolio or the Rolodex of certain more senior and seasoned persons. Would you opt for them to say, okay, yes, you can take someone a little more senior, more seasoned on board who has a good contact base in order to get faster to the customer? Or would you say, in the beginning, maybe start with someone, as you say, who understands the client, who understands the business, and that person tries to get into, because then you could have a certain neutrality or so. What would you see more?
I think that it's important in the board to have some kind of external advisors who have the big picture of the market
Hmm.
and who can share their knowledge of different other yeah, venture things like this. So it's important to have someone who really has the global picture in order to open the eyes of the staff to understand the client issues on a long-term basis. So, however, for a sales position, I will not go for this kind of profile because
Hmm.
there is a need to deliver on a short to mid-term basis. So, I think it's important to combine both, to have people who are focused on short to mid-term, who can really deliver, be straightforward, and on the other side, to have at the board level people with vision and with a global picture and people who are able not to take decisions sometimes too quickly, but to take time to think before making this kind of strategic decisions.
Hmm.
I will say the market knowledge, yes and no. It's important for sales, but I will say for board of advisors, maybe not, because they can bring their, as I said, a global picture, a vision of a market, and it's not because they have been working in a specific sector that they will be efficient in the same, because probably that will narrow their vision of the business. So I would say someone coming from an external industry can bring a lot of added value.
Okay, thank you. And just to remind those who are present, if you have questions, just put them in the chat or via the Q&A session. So I'm picking up now a few questions as well. And the other thing is, okay, we hire someone for sales, and what should we pay attention on with maybe not the agreement, but a little bit the rewards? Should we aim? I'm talking from sales, business development. Should we aim saying, okay, they get a certain fixed salary and then a higher commission, or what would you recommend? I mean, we're talking about small companies.
I will say, yeah, sales are driven. A sales guy needs to have a target. He needs to understand what he's running after. So to me, yeah, with the sales staff, it's important to know what you are expecting from him. And very often when we see that sales recruitment are not working, the people are leaving because they don't exactly understand what the company expects from them. So yeah, it's really important to have maybe not a business plan, because things can change very quickly, but to have targets on 6 months basis, on a 1 year basis, on a quarterly basis, doesn't matter. But the sales guy needs to have precise targets. About the salary package, usually the smaller companies, yeah, they are a bit more aggressive, meaning that they tend to offer more variable than the big ones. So yeah, variable and incentive, yeah, to me it's really important. If a sale is not driven by an incentive or variable, probably something is wrong. Yeah, I will say usually what we see in the smaller companies, we see a salary package can be 50-50 between the basic and the variable, or 60-70 basic and 30-40% variable. But I will say, to me, yeah, this is really mandatory to have an incentive plan, to have clear targets. Of course, things can change. Things can be adjusted a few months later according to the market situation. But to me, it's really important.
And then if we now compare it more to a technical profile, how would you see the remuneration or the salary in the very beginning? What recommendations could you get? Because we are talking here eventually about technical companies, and so the technical aspect is also some key, very important. So are there any recommendation you would say vis-a-vis to treating them with apart to the sales people?
I would say for the technical staff, the incentive is probably less important on a short-term basis. What I mean is, for them, it's important to be able to fully concentrate on the assignment they have, on the technical assignment, and not to take care of the financial part. I don't like to be worried about this. So I will not advise to put too much incentive on the technical staff. For them, they will focus more on delivering a very qualitative work with the expected deadlines and everything. I will put more incentive for the technical guys on the long-term basis, with stock options or other incentive, but not short-term incentive. It's not what they are looking after. They are more looking to build a project, to build something that is working, that is very powerful on the market, and of course they are interested in getting a reward, but maybe in a reward in a few years when the company will be bigger and more mature. So I would say that, to me, that's different from the sales. Probably the sales is running after an incentive which is a bit tangible, which is short to mid-term. For the technical staff, I would say an incentive can be mid to long-term. And of course, possibility to interest the people is to give stock options, to have them part of a company shareholders. Of course, it's that this has another impact on the company organization and the legal work and everything. But to me, the technical guy, they can be a bit frustrated and anxious if they have a feeling that the company can be in financial troubles. Of course, they know that when it's a startup, it's always at risk, but nevertheless, I think it's important to make them feeling very confident and not stressed by a financial aspect. I would say. It's not the main
And
target at work.
yeah, okay. And I mean, when we stay now with the reward remuneration, would you say that that is something we would, okay, of course, it will be adapted over the lifetime of the company. And what about, okay, we have now the first hires, and then over time we hire more people or additional people, additional staff. How would you recommend to not treat them, but to consider them? Because those who joined earlier, they maybe have gone through a harder time, whereas those who join a little bit later. Is there something where one should take care of or pay attention to?
I will say, regarding the package, as I said, stock option can be a possibility, but the financial part. Usually, the company, they start with very basic package, so meaning only a salary, a basic salary and nothing more. Of course, after that will come the question to offer like a real package with additional benefits. There are different things possible on this side. I will say with my experience, we do not really see a difference in terms of package between the new joiners, and the older ones, I would say, one from beginning. The main difference can be on the stock options or on an exit plan. But regarding the package, I think it's important to be fair and not to make differences between the people, because this can create more problems than solutions. And if you keep a group of people who have a different package because they were here from the beginning, I'm not sure it's a good idea. I think to me it's a risk to have the other people not very committed to continue the project.
Okay. And if we now have hired them, but if we go back a little bit, and there's some question coming up, is if you could share some advice or insights on how to hire people, about the whole hiring process, like the searching for candidates, the advertising, the platforms, the onboarding, and so on. Could you give a few, let's say, so advice on this side?
I will say the most critical part in recruitment process. So there are two critical parts in recruitment process. It's the beginning, meaning what we call the sourcing, and the closing. The sourcing takes a lot of time, so we are talking about weeks or months. And the closing can be critical because usually when you have what we call a good candidate, usually he may have other opportunities with other companies. So it's important to be quick in the closing process. What we see in the market now, at least for the IT profile, what we are looking after, it's a company project. IT skilled people in Europe, and probably not only in Europe, are contacted several times per week, per month, on a regular basis. So it's really important to be able to attract them with a project, with a specific project. The project can be challenging because of the technology, because it's a new market trend, it's a new business, or whatever it is, but they will come from the project. Even the country will come after. But regarding recruitment process, getting back to the question, usually it can take 2 to 3 months until you can qualify the very good candidate. Not very good candidates on the candidate side, but I would say people who are open to move as well. Because finding qualified people in Europe or in other countries is not difficult. The most difficult part is to have them able to relocate if the position requires to be based in Luxembourg, because what we see for 2 years now with what we have been through the COVID situation, we tend to see much more people wanting to work on remote work. I would say I receive 5 to 10 requests per week from developers looking for a job, being remote job, so meaning that I want to stay in my country. Do you have a job for me with a company based in Luxembourg? And in Luxembourg, it's quite difficult to work like this. So the sourcing is difficult because of the relocation, not because of finding the right technical skills. So it's really the relocation and to make sure that the people are open to join really the company projects. But the sourcing part is the most difficult, but the most important part as well. So usually to hire technical guys, it's important to contact 100, 200 people to be able to move forward in the process with 3, 4 at the end of the day.
And if we come to the sourcing, if we go back to the sourcing, I mean, a young company, if they are going to look for now for their first hires, what should they, I mean, where should they look for? For example, should they go on platforms on like the former Monster, or should they? What should they use in your?
I will say that the typical job board for technical guys, it doesn't work. When you say Monster, but there are other like this, it doesn't work anymore for many years on this kind of profile. LinkedIn still works. Of course, on LinkedIn, you have to make the difference because it's not easy. Candidates are very much contacted. So you can find a lot of technical profiles on LinkedIn. It's still very powerful, but you are not alone. So you are in competition with many companies. Another possibility is to develop good relationship with engineering schools. And but not looking for the people when you are graduated, to look for them when they are looking for an internship, you know? Because if you are able as a tech company to offer a great project to work on for different interns, it's a great opportunity for you to discover young engineers, to assess them on an internship, and after you can, I would say, hire them more easily because you know them. So to give to a school a specific technical project, to assign different interns to work on it, and after that you can hire the best intern from the project you had. So it still works. We know some employers in Luxembourg who are working like this. They think about the project, they give it to the school, the interns, they are looking for great internships. On the other side, the company is looking for great interns, so it's a win-win situation. And this can provide good recruitment on a mid-term basis. There are some good technical platforms where developers are here. We have a platform like this in Luxembourg, so there are some possibilities, but the traditional job board, it does not really work. Yeah. We are successful on our side with many with LinkedIn, or when we can subscribe to some technical platforms.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. And now another one is, what if you have hired someone and you see it doesn't work out, either on the cultural fit, on the diversity, eventually on the skills? What should one take care when such a moment arrives? What are the points where attention should be paid to?
To me, during the onboarding, so meaning the first months of working together, it's really important to have a regular relationship and to give feedback. Not to make the problem going and going and going without talking. So I will say people are never 100% matching the job description, but it's important to guide them. So to give feedback on a regular basis. So I'm not very surprised when things are not going so well during the probation period, to give feedback and to discuss with the new joiners on a 1 month basis what's going on, to have a feedback. Sometimes things do not work very well because it's a misunderstanding. You are expecting something from someone, but maybe he doesn't understand what you expect from him. So very often when there are some problems, it comes from misunderstanding or bad communication. So to give feedback on a regular basis can really help the person to develop and to adjust. And because it's never black and white. I will say when there is a problem, the problem can come from the company as well. As I said, due to a misunderstanding. So I will say it's important to keep in mind that getting in a job, it's like a learning curve. So, and there is a need to adapt and to progress and to develop. So it doesn't make sense to leave someone alone for 6 months without talking to him and assessing the skills and coming back 6 months later, making the to-do list of what was wrong since 6 months you didn't want to say because you just wanted to have a look and to see if the person understood the problem. And now a person cannot understand the problem if you don't share and communicate with. So it's important to give feedback on a regular basis.
And is there not also, I mean, when we now are a little bit further in the lifetime of the company, and there, of course, there are changes, people change, the company changes, eventually the culture adapts a little bit, and there are departures, voluntary or forced ones. Are there some points where one should pay attention to in order to keep the good faith of those who stay and eventually also those who leave voluntary or forced? Is there something where what one could do if one could do something?
I will say for sure, you have in the employment market, you have people who like to build something and you have people who like to run something. For sure, when you start a new company, the people who like to build something, they will be very satisfied for 1, 2, 3 years. And after that, when it will be more managing and monitoring existing things, these people can be frustrated. So to keep these people, it's important to put them on new projects. On the other side, some people are better in running things, monitoring things, than building something. They're probably more traditional and less creative. So it's a question of mix to work well with the people based on their best skills. Of course, regarding your point about the culture, yes, of course, at the beginning of a company, the culture is more about the personality of the founder and nothing more. After that, weeks after weeks, months after months, the company culture will develop. The company culture is not something you can define or impose. It will come step by step, and for sure, the company culture maybe will change based on the new recruitment, and so it's a smooth process to be managed in order to keep everyone more or less satisfied with the company culture. But it's something very agile, the company culture, for sure. And because when the company will be growing, there will be rules to be put in place for sure, even if everyone is dreaming about very agile way of working without any two hierarchical levels. Yeah, on the paper it works well, but when the company is growing, it's more difficult to keep. So at the end, yeah, step by step, rules will come, and it's important to make sure that people are satisfied with, without losing the DNA of a company from the beginning. So yeah, company culture is changing, and that's really normal. Yeah, there is nothing to do against that.
And are there something where you would say, oops, the agreement was not well done? Is there something where you would say, okay, you should take care in the employment agreement from the early days? Are there some points, except from from the legal ones, the standard ones, but what should one in the early days pay attention to or take care?
We talked earlier about the incentive plan. Typically, an incentive plan can be changed. Maybe after 1 or 2 years, the company will see that it was not a good one for the employee, for the company itself, or whatever. So this kind of thing can be changed and discussed as soon as it's explained and understood by the staff. So of course, yeah, it's important to be fair and to explain why the rules are going to be changed. But of course, typically the benefits and the package, yeah, will probably change because the company has experienced things and will will adapt to the market or to new trends for employee. We see it now with the COVID, where there is a big demand for hybrid work. So balance between working from the office and working from home. It was really less developed in the past, and now it's on the table. So a company who doesn't adjust to this kind of trend, yeah, they are very at risk. So it's really important to keep an eye on it. And
Okay. The other thing is, you touch a little bit about the equity. Would you say that, okay, the first ones you try to do something with stock options and equity, the first hires, and would you say that the later hires should also be included in something like that? Or is that something which, let's say in Luxembourg or so, is not so much of a question?
I will say in Luxembourg, we don't see it a lot, except with big players, if you can name one like Amazon, where everyone, I think, has stock options, more or less. A lot of people, they do have. In Luxembourg, it's not very common. However, I will say that for people who have joined later, it's a really good opportunity for them to be part of a project. It's not because you are not one of the first joiners that you are not eligible to get eligible to a stock option or any equity plan, because with the new joiners they have built something, but the people who came earlier, they are making sure the company can develop as well. So in Luxembourg, I will say it's not very common. However, I think it would be good in terms of staff retention to be more open regarding offering an equity plan or a possibility of stock options to the staff. Yeah. But there is probably much more can be done probably on this side.
And on the other side, we touched upon a little bit on a remote working, on a remote hiring. Is that something what you would say in Luxembourg is very difficult, or is something where you say, okay, it could evolve in the next months, years or so? Because you touched on it on the beginning.
Of course, I will say from a legal point of view, if things stay like they are, it will be difficult because we have a limit. We are not going into the details for people who are not living in Luxembourg in terms of social security and tax. So for the moment, yeah, there are some limits. However, it seems that the local authorities, they tend to change a little bit the rules, but for sure, there is a pressure from the staff. I will say, doesn't matter what is the sector or which kind of position, but there is a pressure for the staff to keep few days working from home, which can be a challenge for the company because this is changing a lot the rules about people management. So it's a question of trust. So yeah, it has a big impact on the company culture and the way of working together. However, no one can avoid that it's a request from a candidate, and we can see now in recruitment processes that it's one of the first questions of a candidate. What is the company policy about remote working and hybrid working? So yeah, it's really important to have a plan on it. Things are just start to be developed now because we have been through, as you know, it was really possible for the companies to work 100% remotely. Things are going to change probably in the next months, but everyone needs to have a plan on it. Yeah, the big banks or the small employers, they are facing the same questions from the staff, so it's important to manage it. I don't think in Luxembourg it's very difficult. First of all, we have a very good internet connection. So in Luxembourg and outside Luxembourg, so it's not very difficult. So we have technological tools to make it working. It's more about the company culture and the way to work together, to assess the work of someone, to follow the work, and to keep the company culture. It's not easy when you have 50% of your staff not at work. Okay, you can see people on video, but it's not the same. You are not taking a coffee with them. You are not making jokes with them. It's really different. So it's a challenge to keep the company culture, I would say.
Okay.
But it's a trend. It's a trend everywhere. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We are now coming it's more or less the last questions which are now popping up. And the one is, for example, would you have a recommendation for a young company who has started and they have hired and so on, and they are evolving in a good way, yeah? In a good way, they are growing. Are there some recommendations on the HR side which you would give them on their way as a closing remarks?
I will say that being fair, showing that the company culture is not only a buzzword or a PowerPoint presentation, because if people are really living the company culture, I will say they will stay for longer. Because that's one of the problem in the tech company. The people tend to change jobs very quickly. Maybe less in Luxembourg than in other countries, but nevertheless, to have someone who stay more than 2, 3, 4 years, it's not easy. So I will say stick to the company culture, keep the close communication with the staff, as it was in the beginning when the company was a startup. So keeping easygoing communication. So to me, it's really important to make sure that the door are still open, even if the company is bigger. But of course, when a company are growing, yeah, they are hiring legal staff, HR staff to make sure that everything is in place. And this is a challenge to keep the dynamism and the energy of a company with more rules, more staff, and more regulations. So it's a challenge. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much so far for all these insights, very valuable insights. I would like to thank you for that. I also like to thank the audience for this. And as usual, the recording will be available via the Startup Grind channel and also the European Universe Startup. So thank you, Nicolas, and looking forward to very interesting and well prepared companies on the HR side. Thank you very much.